recorded, so you'll be able to come back to it later. And then I'll say real quick about kind of the format, and then I'll kind of kick it over to Ben to say anything he wants to say, because it's his meetup and he's gracefully asked me to come back again. He has some other stuff too. So in terms of tonight, everybody is just going to be on type mode. So feel free to use the chat to interact the way you are. Question specific stuff, put it in the Q&A, because you could see questions can get lost fairly easily. Ben's going to be monitoring the Q&A. And so at certain points in time, kind of in the presentation, if there's logical breaks or good questions, he'll ask those questions as they come through. The overall intention is to do about an hour-ish, maybe a little bit more of demonstration within Lightroom. It's kind of a one-part presentation, one part within Lightroom. The key things to understand are, one is you'll get the recording. Two, all of the slides I'm going to show you in Lightroom, when you get the copy of everything, you'll have a copy of all those. So all the reference materials that you're going to see on the screen in terms of the kind of slides, you'll have those. I'm going to give you guys a couple workflows and some other stuff. So that's in there. So use the Q&A as we go through. So I'll turn it over to Ben to say anything he wants to kind of kick it off, and then we'll kick it off.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I'd like to introduce Nick Stover. And so usually I host these Lightroom user group meetings. I don't really feel like the host tonight. Really, Nick is hosting this one, but I really appreciate him doing this, and really appreciate all you guys for coming out. We have, looks like 141 people here at the moment, which is fantastic. It's a great turnout. Really glad to see it, and that speaks to Nick and his skills as a photographer and presenter. So that's really great. My name is Benjamin Ward. I'm a product manager on the Lightroom team. I feel like for this audience, this is probably like kind of a dirty secret. I actually work primarily on Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic. Sorry, we have two similar products with virtually the same name. Nobody asked me. But I worked for many, many years on Lightroom Classic, and definitely know a bit about that too. So I'm just really going to be monitoring the Q&A pod. If there are questions that I am able to answer, I will type answers into the Q&A pod. It looks like I can do that. And otherwise, I will kind of wait for appropriate breaks in the presentation, okay, Nick, and I'll relay the questions to you for you to answer. But I think that's it for me. Okay.
Well, sounds great.
I'm going to turn off my video and everything. So.
Oh gosh, it's going to be just me. That's scary.
It's going to be just you.
Yeah. All right. So I saw the last question I'll answer in the chat is, what are the notes on the closet doors? And luckily it's interestingly enough, it's my photography and travel locations related to particular shoots and photography projects. And they're all on, it's on nonstick, or really, it's called artist tape. So I can move them around. So when I get into a year like 2020, when all of my workshops and everything else completely falls apart, I can take those things and easily move them around to rejudge when I'm going to do things. So there isn't a manifesto or anything else, but those are my planning things. So, all right. So we are recording. I see stuff coming through in the Q&A, but I'm going to go on ahead and start here. So starting on the Lightroom. So, all right. Moving the chat bar over here, we should be good to go. Ben, can you confirm you can see?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, I'm going to keep it in full screen mode tonight. I shouldn't have to show anything else. And I'm trying something different. So what I'm trying different tonight is I'm going to try to do the entire presentation within Lightroom. So it's going to be a mix of, actually, I can't do it as well in full screen now that I think about it. It will be a mix of Lightroom. It's mostly going to be demonstrations within Lightroom, but some of the slides will kind of cue us to particular things or examples in such a way that'll help quite a bit. So want to say welcome and thank you to coming for 911, what's your Lightroom emergency? So this one is incorporated in some questions we got ahead of time. We got a nice number of questions, some of which I don't have the skill sets or capabilities to answer technical questions. A lot of this was already kind of been pre-built through all of my private work and workshop classes with clients related to Lightroom, excuse me. So Lightroom and all of the work I've done with clients and understanding different problems that they've encountered. Some of them are on the call tonight. And luckily, we're going to hopefully learn some new stuff. are going to be some of the issues we've encountered in the past, and some of them are also things I've gone through myself. So that's an overall intention. So I teach a platform, which is how some of you came here for tonight, called the Psychology of Photography. And it's focused around kind of 5 main pillars. And without going into the full scope of it tonight, I will tell you that expression and interpretation falls pretty firmly in where Lightroom kind of falls, the technical side, much more than what we see in a lot of the work on the creative side, the reflection and the refinement, or the formation and the evolution of stuff. The vision isn't necessarily going to be driven by Lightroom practices or processes, but I think there's also an element of the technique. So we're looking at technique and processing. And one of the biggest reasons that I think Lightroom is extremely important to understand is if we don't have our Lightroom in order, so to speak, we are going to be in a place in a situation where we don't feel as organized with the work we're doing and what we're working on. So a lot of the practices we're going to talk about tonight and ways to overcome things are ways to really help us maximize our time and view processing differently. So I am, besides having a Lightroom pillow behind me, I'm a big believer in the Adobe products. Biggest reason is their investment into their continued refinement and improvement, and the other parts is just, I really truly believe that it's the best stuff out there. So I like Lightroom a lot. I'm a huge advocate of Lightroom, even though I use Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw as well. So it was interesting. I'm putting together this presentation and I was thinking, God, this is kind of like cat herding. And I found this really funny thing where this cat herder out there, the daydreams, I think I'd be rather manage a large software development project. And I'm thinking, does Ben Ward sit there as a large software development project manager and say, wow, I'd really much rather be cat herding today? And I'm not sure. So I don't know if Ben's going to say or not, but I thought that was interesting. Some days. Okay. So he dreams of cat herding, and this cat herder is dreaming of managing a software development project like Lightroom. So some of the things we'll cover tonight, this one, this was kind of the initial dialogue I put together, the frame. I'm not going to go through each individual one of these. We ended up adding quite a few of them right out of the gates with questions and some of the other things. But some of the basis of a lot of this is establishment of some best practices, simplification, learning how to do things kind of across the board. So it's not going to be complex. I don't believe I'm going to do any technical processing tonight. If we have time towards the end, which I highly, highly doubt we will, I would do some, but just to give you a sense. Okay, so the way I kind of look at it isn't the same as what we see for the terrorism threats of the orange alerts and the yellow alerts, but to the degree of what I categorize stuff tonight is how do we consider this? Is it more on the stability side of this would be something that would be nice to know, or is it on the disaster side? Like this is something that absolutely has to get fixed right now. This is mission critical. Or is it something that have some need to know that? Yeah, I have some need to figure out how to do collections, or maybe I have some need to do stuff. So the intention is to start a little bit on the nice to know side. And over time, we'll kind of get a little bit further towards that, oh my God, three alarm bell type thing where this really needs to be fixed right now. So that's the initial thing. So I'd say the initial thing to start with for a lot of this work is Lightroom or Lightroom Classic and making that delineation. There's still some confusion, not because of Adobe's imperfections or anything else, between LRC and LR. LRC being the desktop version and LR, Lightroom, being the desktop, mobile, and web version, and where things go. So the key differentiators, which I walk through with different people at different times, is one of them is going to be local. You can have that either on your external drive or your regular computer. One of them is cloud. Lightroom is all cloud. File backups not included. And then Lightroom has some limitations with regards to file storage. And then you have to start to pay for upgrades, and then it doesn't include Photoshop. The ease of use kind of varies between the two of them. Lightroom Classic is going to be much more in depth and detail. And then you have the opportunities for other organizations. One of the key things I would say between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom, in terms of people that are considering that, is you can't do smart collections, which some people really, really are attached to in Lightroom, I don't believe, but you can in Lightroom Classic. And so I'm a believer. I use Lightroom Classic personally, and that's just where I started in my workflow. And one of the big reasons is I'm constantly popping back and forth between Photoshop in Lightroom and I need that seamless thing. And then I have backup. So that's just the would be nice to know for anyone that's kind of considering. You can do, there's lots of research and articles about that, but that's kind of the initial portion. Okay. So
Nick, let me interrupt.
911.
Let me interrupt really quickly.
Yep.
Can you set the Lightroom Classic window there to full screen to use the full screen to make it a little bit bigger? And possibly if folks are still having trouble seeing details, maybe drop the resolution a little bit, or
is that better?
More. I think so. I'll wait for folks to weigh in here. But for now, I think you can proceed with that. Okay. You can make the Lightroom UI window like full screen as well. And that'll make it at least a little bit bigger.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll start with the full screen. I could have done that actually, and then when I get to come out, I'll kind of go through. Okay. So, and that's where I'll kind of have to be popping back and forth, and I've still yet to find a good way to zoom all the way in and out, but we'll kind of figure that. So 911, does the new ordinance allow me to use presets? And so this is another one that's a nice to know. And for those of you that are seasoned users within Lightroom, so I'll go into full screen here. I'm going to show you just really quick. For those of you that are seasoned users, you're going to find this probably a little bit boring, but I think it's a key thing to understand just how simple images are. So I'm just going to take a simple one, any one of my images, I guess, from, oops, put the raws away. Sorry. So I'm going to take I should have had the one queued up I wanted to use, but I'm going to take a simple image. Doesn't really matter which one I have here. And I'm going to do some really quick edits on this. Is going to be very, very quick. Shoot, I had the one queued up earlier. Sorry. No, 2 seconds. Come on. So take any one of these images. These are from a recent night out photographing the big waves as we go through. So we'll look at this image here and we'll assume it's back in its unedited format. So as we look at it in an unedited thing, we reset this image back down to where we are. So now what we're doing, or what we're going for, is doing a basic edit of the image to get it to something we like. So maybe we go through and we set our profiles real quick. We do a quick white balance adjustment to kind of warm it up, open up our whites, our shadows, our whites a little bit, take up our blacks, add a little bit of vibrance and saturation, do our lens corrections. And then I come down, I usually do a little bit, I boost up my blue calibration on my sensors down there. I will come through oftentimes on my tone curve, open up my lights and my darks, take down my highlights ever so slightly, open up my shadows a little bit to keep the details there. Maybe I'll add a little bit of clarity, a little bit of texture to bring out the midtone. So let's say that I got to the point where I was happy with this edit, and this isn't a full edit, I'm just trying to show. Then I could come over here and on the left side, which I might be able to zoom in a little bit here, shows, and still, no, it's not going to work to do the zoom like that. Sorry. I'll come over here in the little plus button, which you can see right here. I'll click the plus button and hit create preset. And what I can do when I set that preset up is I can choose whether I want it to be everything. So checking all. So if I found a particular thing, or if I wanted it to just be some smaller portion of it. And then I can title that preset. So I could call this ocean preset. And let's call it ocean. And then all of a sudden down here on my user presets, I now have that fully stored. And so that ocean preset's there. So now I have other presets that I've already built over time. So these can sometimes really help me a lot when I'm doing my initial imports to get a sense of what I'm working with. So this is my initial import test that I use on a lot of images to see what I'm working with. And then over time, I'll kind of change it or navigate it back through. But that's how simple it is to create presets. And you can go much more complex, but people oftentimes think it's really complex to create your own presets. And it's that simple. Have the settings you want within the device, within your computer, within Lightroom, and then you can just modify it from there. So that's how we do presets. Okay, so that's the first of the first two of the, as I said, we're going to start on the kind of easier side and then keep going, or the more less advanced, then we're going to keep kind of rolling through. So 911, I want to report an overcrowding of my workspace. And so sometimes people will get overwhelmed with all of the things, or they'll look at my Lightroom kind of right out of the gate and say, wow, yours does a lot more stuff or a lot less stuff than mine does. And the kind of minor tweaks that I make kind of right out of the gate, or advise people to do, is to first, you can right click up here and you can get rid of, if you wanted to, because I don't use map or book or slideshow or web. And then you can select just what you want. So the only two modules that I use are library develop, and occasionally I use print to print a couple print cards. So I'll simplify it oftentimes up there. Another change that I advocate oftentimes within Lightroom that people can make if they get overwhelmed by the, having all of their windows open, is you can right click over here. And I'm not sure how long this has been here because I wasn't aware of it years ago. What's called solo mode. And what solo mode does is it collapses down everything but the module you're working in. So as you pick up and you open another module, it's just going to open that module that you're doing the actual work. So if you do your work in here and then you want to go up to your basic, it's going to close that. So it's going to keep everything kind of at your hands right there, versus you having to scroll all the way down through. So I like solo mode. It's kind of a nice thing to use sometimes, especially when I know where things are. The other thing I like to do and I advocate is the identity plate up here on the top left. So when you're in the identity plate, you can click over here and right click here, and you can select your own personalized identity plate. And so as we pull this up, you can import in your own graphic identity plate. So if you have your own signature, or your own studio thing, your own name as well, versus just Adobe Lightroom, you can really quickly do that in there. Probably a small thing. And then as we're in grid mode and some of the other places, you can click on this little toggle down here and you can go into all kinds of different view modes. And these can dictate what you want for your sortings. So these are going to be really hard to see, but at the bottom of Lightroom is all of our different sortings, whether we want a grid sorting or before and afters or faces or whatever else. And so if you feel like, whoa, wait a second, I was having this before and after thing now and it's gone now. So if I'm in the develop module and it's gone now, well, you can come down here and chances are you've unselected it. But sometimes you'll see people with everything on in their bottom portion and a lot of things they don't use. So if you're not using color labeling or flagging or navigation or slideshow or whatever, just take those out and kind of simplify your workspace down to more of what you want. So that's the one thing I can do. The other thing I could tell you really quickly is you can also customize your develop panel. So if you see here, I pulled this up by right clicking over here, and then you can arrange things the way you want them. And so my lens corrections is actually higher. It's actually second highest behind my basics. And usually it's much further down, but lens correction as I'm doing my workflow is usually the second thing I want to do, if not the first. So I've rearranged, going through this way, my develop panel into the order I want it. And so that's another thing, kind of customizing the workspace as you go through. Okay, so there's our kind of like, yeah, what would be nice to know, or kind of things to clean up. Now let's keep digging. I need to report some missing images. Calling up to report. Now, knowing this would make things a little bit easier. And this is kind of a little bit more, gets into be a little bit more complex. Like, where are my images located? And I think oftentimes for any of us that have had Lightroom on more than one computer, or have migrated through multiple catalogs or external drives, or made the switch from Mac to PC or PC to Mac, oftentimes we'll have our images in a lot of different places. So this becomes a major frustration. So I'm showing a couple things here to kind of help in that direction. First things first. So let's say we're in here, and I'm going to try this Zoom thing, see if I can get it to work. Yeah, works a little bit better. So you can see up here, when I zoom in with the control thing, it says 2-day workshops and 2-day image uploads in this processing session. It has the grayed out
Hey
thing.
Nick, just a heads up so you're aware. I think I at least am not seeing when you zoom. So I think that's
Okay. Yeah,
that's
I
not
still
coming
haven't figured
across.
out within
Yeah.
Zoom how to zoom it in. So so that I don't think you can. So I'll just have to stay here. So unfortunately, but so up here it has, thank you for letting me know, Ben. So the 2-day workshops, you can even see without reading the fine print. These are lighter gray than these ones here. So these are files either I moved on my drive or did something else, but they were now considered missing. And so if I click on the 2-day image uploads, they're going to have a couple things going on, one of which is they're not able to be found or anything else. And so now I can click on this, right click as well, and go to find missing folder. And then I could know, okay, I moved that into my 2-day workshops are now under my presentations, my tutorials, my 2-day workshops, my seascapes, client images. Okay, there we go. So now it's remapped that one back through correctly. And so now that what was grayed out before the 2-day workshops is now completely brought back in. So that's one way to find the images when they're missing right there, is to be able to go to exactly the specific one you're missing. The other part of this equation that we oftentimes get into is we could be in a situation where we have images. So let's take I'll look at my exported images folder, which is a wide variety of things for different purposes in my Peru. And I could go, gosh, I don't remember where that folder is or what that is or where is that located. So you can right click here and you can go show in Finder. And if I'm not sure exactly what it says on a PC, Ben, you might know, but I'm with this minimized.
Sorry, I was reading questions in the Q&A pod. What were you asking, Nick?
So when I'm right clicking and when I'm right clicking in to find the document. All right, sorry, I got to minimize Lightroom just a hair again. So when I right click show in Finder, I don't know what it's, I don't know what it says in, if you're on a PC.
Oh, I think it's show in Windows Explorer.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So now I've clicked show in Finder and it's pulled up exactly where those files are located. So I can know on my hard drive, I can see the mapping. It's under my general thing. It's in this folder. It's in this location. I can see the full mapping down below, how it goes all the way back. So now I know exactly where those images are on my hard drive, or on my hard drive or my computer. So this becomes another big part of knowing where your images are. So the one part is if they go missing in Lightroom, how to re-find them and remap everything incorrectly. The other part is if they go missing, if they're in Lightroom, but you don't know where they are on your drive, maybe you imported them into a pictures folder or things got put in there. That's the way to find them, is to right click and then show in Finder, which is good. Okay, so we're kind of getting through the initial portion of stuff, and now we're going to take a look at some of the other stuff. So the next portion I want to talk about is the import workflow, which kind of goes in a little bit to going back to this one. I need to report some missing images from that standpoint. And when I'm talking about the workflow, so you'll get a copy of this. This is a full import. There's 2 options for import workflow to be able to, for you to establish your own workflow in the future, which should be very helpful in a lot of different regards. So the idea is to follow a workflow on your importing, and that will really minimize where your files are in different locations. And so as we do an import workflow, which you'll have one here, and you can modify it as you see to or no fit, as you see fit, that's going to really help you in a lot of regards. Okay, so the next one is a speed violation. Your Lightroom is going 25 in a 75 zone. And this is not always Lightroom's problem. Sometimes it's computer problem. Sometimes it's good old operating system problem. Sometimes it's a hardware problem. And sometimes it's plain old operator error. So one of the first things you can do, which I would recommend when you exiting Lightroom, is to optimize. And when you leave Lightroom, you should be optimizing your catalog. And so this is the optimization. So the last time I backed up Lightroom was 9 days ago, so I need to do it. Every time you exit, there's an option, and you'll see it in a little while, to optimize your catalog. And if you keep your catalog optimized through your exit settings or by going up to file edit, this does speed up your computer a fair amount. So that's one way to get your Lightroom back closer to the 75. The next is it's understanding it's not just Lightroom. So here on a Mac, if I go up to the top where the little apple is, I hit about this Mac, and then I go to storage, it's going to calculate exactly how much available storage I have. And so this is a 2.1 terabyte Fusion drive. And I have 636 available of the 2.1. And so you should always have 20% of your hard drive space available at any point in time. So for a 2 terabyte drive, I should always have at least 400 gigabytes available. If you start branching into that portion and that factor that's in there, your computer will start to slow down quite a bit. So that's one of the things I would tell you is look at your hard drive, tell how much space you have on there. And if you're getting really close to maxing it out, start moving some stuff onto external drives, start backing some stuff up into the cloud, start doing a whole bunch of other things. Otherwise, it's going to make a huge difference to your computer. The next thing, which I talk about it with some of my workshop people recently, if you're on a Mac, there's really easy, cost-effective ways to upgrade your memory. I went recently from 16 to 32 gigs of memory. It cost me $110 to do that. And I've seen a lot of increase in space. So you can check that. I'm happy to send the article related to Mac. I'm sure there's one out there for PC as well. But that's another part to kind of get our computer kind of back up into that space. Okay, so now it's not just Lightroom, but then the next part is I want to report a self-inflicted slowdown. And this self-inflicted is what I'm talking about, where this is me, for example, even, can't remember, I can't use my click mouse when I'm in presentation mode. Sorry about that. So this is me just a couple days ago where I had not deleted a single backup from my computer since going all the way back to 2016. So that was making up 10 gigabytes of my backup memory. So when I switched my backup, I didn't go through and delete it. So you can find out within Lightroom to find out exactly where your backup is, which I'll show in a little bit. And then I would recommend affirming you're getting backing up, which you'll see by the current dates. You can delete everything going back from, keep a couple of the most recent backups and you can delete all the stuff. And that freed up just on this 10 gigs right there, which made a huge difference. So those
Nick, sorry to interrupt real quick. Just still a few comments from folks about having trouble seeing things. Is it possible? Also, I feel I should add some comments about how handsome you are, but could we still turn off your video so that your screen filled the whole Zoom area?
Sure.
If we do that, we can get yours there. Now your screen is filling the whole Zoom area, and then can you make Lightroom full screen? And then if that's still too small for people, I think the only other option beyond that would be for you to drop your screen res a bit so that everything appears a little larger.
Okay. Yeah. Or when they watch it, some of the stuff back, they can zoom in on the channel, I guess, and see it on their screen. So
for sure.
I don't know if there's any other way.
Definitely looks better from my perspective here.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't need to be seen anyways. Then I can be sitting here making funny faces.
I kind of miss you already, but
I'm coming back later. So
okay.
Thanks,
okay.
Nick. So sorry about that. Yeah, I can't. People have said I zoom in at 200%. That's not going to do anything to change the images because you can't zoom in within the modules. So, but either here nor there. Sorry about this, but we're going through. So, okay. So the other one is, so when we go up to the other part, so the first two I talked about, one was kind of self-created in terms of running your drive too close to full. The other portion of it is having too much, not enough space. These ones you can do here, which are on this sheet, you'll get a copy of this, which I'm going to show now. These are things you can do to improve Lightroom, in my opinion. So you go into Lightroom Classic up here on the left, and then you go to Preferences, and then Performance. So you go scroll across the top. And the changes you're going to want to make are, if you have a graphics processor, which most of the new computers do, newer computers, my computer is 4 or 5 years old and has a graphics processor, is to turn that to auto versus off. So if you're already, you can get it to use the graphics processor, it's going to be a lot faster. The other two settings I change are, I increase my camera raw cache to 20 gigabytes. So by increasing my camera raw cache, it's able to cache much more within there and moves a lot quicker. And then I limit my video cache size to 1 gig. So the next check box down there, because I don't need to have videos. I don't do videos within Lightroom. I do it in other programs or whatever. So that's the other one. And then you can do the smart previews instead of originals for some image editing. And this one kind of comes and goes. Some people like it, other people don't. But this sometimes helps to be able to speed things up a little bit. So those are the things I would say within Lightroom you can change pretty easily. Okay. So I think I'm a hoarder. I don't have a backup strategy, so I keep all of my images. I think these were pretty close to an actual client's words of how many memory cards they had, how many external drives they had. They had 3 computers. They were just unwilling to admit that they had to not have so many images, and we needed to come up with a strategy, which was a lot of fun. So we got them with the strategy, and the backup strategy becomes a key component. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So one of the top things is to know where your backup is being synced and make sure that it is synced to the cloud or onto an external drive. And so sometimes, and you can see, and I'll show you right now, going up here again. So we're going to go to Preferences. We're going to go to General. And we're going to, sorry. Not going to go there. Sorry. Oh, I switched it over there. Sorry, there it's back over there. Okay, so now we're into when we're exiting Lightroom. And I don't want to do it right now because we lose the presentation. But where you're going to have it is where you're going to be, you can click on the show portion and you can tell it how often to back up. And so for me, I back up only once a week when editing Lightroom. And then the show portion is that makes sure it's stored in a place on my computer that's backed up into the cloud. And so my Lightroom catalog is backed up directly into the cloud, which means that if I were to lose my computer right now, I would still have my entire catalog backed up and then anything else I've saved into the cloud. And that's a big deal because some people will have their Lightroom backup onto their computer and they'll lose their entire Lightroom. They'll lose their entire computer, excuse me, and they won't be able to keep it. So the next
Nick, I want to add to that real quick.
Yep.
I wanted to verbally answer a question that was just asked in the chat pod or in the Q&A pod. That is a backup of the catalog file. It is not a backup of your images, of your photos. So if you only have the catalog file backed up and you were to lose everything else, that does you no good at all because all your photos are gone.
Yep. And that's the key next portion we're definitely going to talk about. And it's a key thing there because your files is different than your catalog. And I could probably find 6,000 ways to say that differently. This is just your catalog. These are your edits. These are your smart collections. These are your keywords. These are all the things you do on the skin on top of your images. And so if your Lightroom catalog, you lose your Lightroom catalog for whatever reason, you don't lose your images. But if you lost your images and your catalog, then you're kind of starting over from scratch. And so I don't want to see you lose both of them. So the other thing is on the backup catalog portion, when it pulls this up, you can see, and I actually can zoom this portion a little bit more, not really. Every time Lightroom exits, you could change that. And then this is the backup folder location. So this is where I have it chose. And then I optimize my catalog, which I mentioned before. And then so that makes sure it's running faster. So making sure that box is checked every time you exit. And then I know exactly where my Lightroom catalog's backed up. So the next portion of this is the built-in free cloud storage options. Um, these are what you have. So people are like, oh, I have this or I have that. So understand what the free options are. Excuse me. iCloud is 5 gigabytes, Dropbox free is 2 gigabytes, and Google, if you have a Gmail account, is 15 gig, which sounds like a fair amount, but if you're photographing with raw images, you can get up there pretty good size pretty quickly. So this is my raw files. I have 26,000 raw files, which makes up 648 gigabytes on my computer. And so that is way beyond the 15 gigabytes for free from Google or anything else. And so I use a 1-2 combo. I pay $12 a month for Dropbox, and $10 or 12, something like that. And I get 2 terabytes of storage. So I sync all of my portfolio images, and from time to time I sync my edited image, my raw images up into the Dropbox cloud. So in case of complete disaster, I have them. But my primary backup is an external hard drive. And I have 2 external drives, and you can set these up to mirror. You can set them up just to copy things in there. And the thing about external drives now is how incredibly cost effective they've gotten. So this is a 5 terabyte drive, 5 terabytes. This is like 2.5 times larger than my hard drive on my computer, and it's $110 now. So the cost, the prohibitive cost that these things had before just doesn't exist any longer. And so that is a major deal. So having an external drive should be part of your backup strategy. There's pros out there that you can use things called a RAID that's really expensive, but most of the regular consumers, you don't need to do an expensive system. You can do this. Okay, so 911, this is kind of back. We're gonna take a quick backtrack before we go on. I've lost my toolbar, is another one you'll see from time to time. So maybe we're in, oh, it could even be in this one right here, and all of a sudden the toolbar is gone. You look at the bottom of my screen, I don't have my toolbar anymore. Where's all the things I used to get by? So T is toolbar. So remember T for toolbar, which is one of the camera shortcuts. And so it's a way that oftentimes you might hit it accidentally or whatever and lose your toolbar, think it's gone. You can also fix it under view. It's a simple fix, but it can be frustrating as we go through it. Okay, 911, my keywords have gone bad. And this happens. And let me show you how it happens. So here is my keyword list down here. And it is absolutely massive. And you would say, wait a second, this guy, he's got zeros and ones and zeros and, like multiple duplicates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's going on? And the answer is when I do Lightroom, when I do photo critiques, I import people's images into Lightroom. And so whatever keyword structures they're using gets pulled into my Lightroom. And so luckily I don't use keywords because I have all of their keywords in here. And so it could become very frustrating if I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't. But I do have clients that'll have things like sunset, sunrise, sunset, or, maybe they'll misspell something from time to time. So I'm going to show a couple quick things to do. So say even like here over on the right, which you may or may not be able to see, we have rock and rocks. So what I'm going to do is just grab rock and put it underneath rocks. So you can consolidate keywords down that way just by dragging them underneath each other. The other would be, say, something like Southwest. I don't want to keep that one. You can just right click it and delete it and get rid of them. You can also do the check boxes here and select more than one and merge things together. So there's an opportunity to key up to really clean up your keywords if it's something you're really big on that I don't think some people understand. They can quickly drag them through. But okay, should we take any quick questions or keep rolling, Ben?
There was a question about, and I know you spoke to this a little bit in the context of backup, but maybe you can talk about it a little bit more. There was a question about I think it was sort of backup aside, where do you store your images? Are they on your internal drive? Are they on an external drive? How do you work with that? Or is that something you're getting to later?
I have it back, better one of it back here. So, and it's actually better to show, I'll just show it here versus getting out of Lightroom now that we've got things kind of dialed in. So I store everything on my desktop personally, so I can know without a doubt where they are at all times. All of my raw photos are stored on my desktop. And then I have the full organization of those folders down through there. So I know exactly where my images are at any point in time. They're not buried anywhere. And then if I want to copy them or move them, I know I can do, I don't have to go through subfolders, et cetera. So that's what I use. Then when I process images, then I have a separate folder for all of my processed images that I've exported as JPEGs or prepared for print or prepared for web. And they go into a folder that is automatically synced up into the cloud. So it's a Dropbox folder that automatically gets synced. So there's a couple strategies with regards to this. I saw really quick, I kind of looked over and people were talking about Backblaze. There's others. I think here's the one here. I want to turn myself in for running information files off of 2 computers. There's Backblaze. There's Carbon Copy Cloner is another one. Resilio is another one. And these are somewhere around the $50 one-time type fees. Some of them are recurring. So that backup strategy isn't something that I've had to use or implemented. I don't have one definitive one I could say, yes, use this one. There's just a lot of different ones out there, so people can use them. Okay. Well, we'll kind of keep going. I think you're answering a lot of the questions, which is making it easier for me, and then we'll keep going. Okay. So 911, my presets moved to Florida with my ex. And surprisingly, this has happened, maybe not directly to Florida, but people have lost their presets. And it's usually one of 2 things. One, they migrated something and lost that location. And so if you go under preferences, I'm not going to demonstrate this one just because it takes, I guess we can do it real quick. Preferences, and then we go to presets. You're going to want to have show partially compatible developed presets checked. So what sometimes happens is people don't have this checked, and there's either an update of a version or something else happens, and there's one teeny portion of it that's not compatible, and it completely removes all of the presets from their settings. So having that checked will bring back your presets most of the time. The other thing is if you don't have that, if you do have that checked and you don't know where they are, you can hit Store Lightroom Develop Presets, and it will automatically pull up where your presets are located. So here's all of my different presets located in one location. So I already have that right there to take a look at. So the Lightroom will tell you, because this one's buried. This one's buried under Library, Application Support, Adobe, Camera Raw, Settings. There's my presets. And I don't think anybody's going to remember that, but you can go into Lightroom and it'll tell you exactly where the presets are saved. So that's how we get our presets back. I can't say anything about going to Florida, but and then here's what I was saying. Here's where they're located, and then the particular ones. I wouldn't advocate to rearrange your presets outside of Lightroom. If you need to rearrange or regroup your presets or rename them, always do that in Lightroom, which is good. Okay, I need to request an armed escort. And this one is more frequent than you would think, and this one takes a lot of time. There's a lot of different articles to be able to do this, but the armed escort is you're updating your folder location. So either you're moving things from an external drive onto your computer, or you're switching computers or whatever. And the infrastructure you want to do is you want to use one of these programs to build out the file structure on where you're putting it. And then you just come in here and you right click on your photos. So here's my raw photos here. And you go to update folder location. And then you just pick the new folder location. And so it becomes much more simple to move it than most people would think. It's not that simple in terms of the stress. I can tell you it's pretty stressful. So before you do it, spend some time kind of checking it and going very slowly. But there is a way to move all of your folders relatively easily when you get there. Okay, so I already went through this one. I left my window open. Now I can't find my files. I showed you how to find missing folders and files. And then here's the other part of it. You can use it also to find particular files. And so if it's I'll go full screen. So if you have one particular image that you have no idea where it is, you can click on that and locate the particular image. The other part of this thing drives me crazy sometimes with my mouse. It's my mouse. It's not Lightroom. The other thing about this is you can check the box for find nearby missing photos. And sometimes people won't see that. So they'll go through and they'll individually check and find each particular box. And so what you want to do is if you collect this, it will find any others that are nearby and they're missing. So that'll sometimes save you quite a bit of time. So if you have a bunch of other ones that are missing, select that button and it'll help you out. Okay. And then I showed you how to find your folders in Finder. So if you don't know where they are, then you click on the Finder and find them there. Do you offer witness protection for my files if they move? So another one people sometimes fall into, which I'll show real quick, is they have files in one folder and they don't move them. They keep them all in a file. And so you can see, well, for those of you that can see the screen, I have a lot of subfolders. I organize my files, which I'll talk about towards the end, by year and by month. And then I'll do subfolders for each individual place or location. That's my methodology as a landscape photographer, which really works well to me. So if I go to Death Valley, I'm not going to keep just Death Valley as a whole. I'm going to organize by the particular geographies, so Badwater, et cetera. But if I'm in a place where I have all these different images and I want to start to break them out into subsets, I can do it really easily. So maybe I want to break out into post sunset kind of glow or something else, or any ones I want to do. So I would just click the first one in that series, click the last one in the series by holding down Shift. And so now it's highlighted 16 of those photos in the settings. And I can do it one of two ways. One, if I wanted to drag these images into a different folder, I just pick them and grab them, and you can see it's highlighting on the blue of where I'd want to drag them into. So if I had wanted to, oh, these don't belong in here, they belong somewhere else, or I want to combine them. I always advocate doing these types of moves within Lightroom. So it's automatically going to move all of your settings and move your folder wherever you want to go and create the right structure. It'll move them on your hard drive to where they need to go. But if I didn't want to move them, I wanted to create a subfolder, then I just highlight the images I want, come over here and I right click, and then I do create folder inside Badwater, and I would name it what I wanted to name it, post sunset. And then I would say include selected photos, and then I would create it, and it would automatically move that into a subfolder. So now I have the main folder, which is all the images, and then I have a post sunset folder, which is just 16 of them. So that sometimes is a really helpful way for file organization and for other things as well to kind of move through. All right, so going back up into our slides. I gotta find exactly, okay. So 911, my neighbor's metadata drama is keeping me awake. And this one we don't see that often. I actually just saw this with a client. We just did this week actually, and it was the first time I'd seen this, and so we spent some time getting it right. And what we were dealing with is we were migrating some external drive information, migrating information that was on a couple different drives onto one, and kind of combining some really cool things. And it was taking a little while to get the catalog synced or whatever. And so what I found with this particular thing, there's two things. One is before you sync all of your metadata, try it with a couple of your images and see what you want to do. Either that importing the settings from the disk, which is if you edited it in a different program, then you would want to import your settings. If you hadn't edited it in a different program, then you would hit overwrite settings and it would take what was in Lightroom. So what's going on is you have these two different information about metadata that's conflicting in Lightroom, saying which one do you want me to pay attention to. And so most of the time, in the readings I've done, and then now thinking back through my old stuff after I went through with this, 95% of the time, I would say the override settings for what's in Lightroom is what you want, but you want to check that first. And then once you check that, then you can sync all the way across. I think it was with S. You just highlight the images and hit Command S, and then it'll sync your metadata settings all the way across. So it's a one way to fix all these little exclamation points. You can see all these ones here within the system. So that one worked. Okay, 911, I'd like to speak to my attorney about the use of smart collections. So I have to admit, I was a slow adopter of smart collections, and I'm starting to use them more and more. So for those of you that don't know, smart collections don't move the files at all out of their main folders up here. And so my geographical and date functions that I have up here don't move at all when I create a smart collection, but I can use them for all kinds of different things. And so if I'm assembling, case studies, or if I'm doing my, for some of my classes, I'll find particular images and examples, and I can just drag those into smart collections. The other opportunity, which I'm wanted to show you guys tonight, is we can build them by month. And so I'm going to show you real quick. So I want to eventually build out all of my images I've taken in January, February, March, April, May, but every 12 months of the season. A couple different reasons. One is geographically speaking, it's a good way to sometimes know I go this place at this particular time, or I need more of these images, or I want spring images, or I want fall. I could go right into that. But I'm going to show you real quick how to build one. And so you go to right click and you hit duplicate smart collection. And so now it's created April images copy, and then you double click it. And I would come into and I would say May images. And so now I just go through and I'll show you how to do this quicker than usual. So now I copy the first one. So this is 2017, 18, 19, 20, etc. And then I just go through and I copy the 0501 and then come down through here and paste it. I guess I could probably do this one just faster just by this. And so this is so now we're going back through and we're doing May of every year, including this year, which I haven't taken any yet. But as I take images in May of this year, they'll start to get added in. And then I'd come over here and I'd go 0531. And then maybe I copy that all the way back up through. And almost done. It'll automatically adjust. So if you type in like February 31st, it'll automatically adjust it to February 29th, which is kind of cool. And then I hit save. And now all of my May images that I've ever taken in the month of May are now in a complete smart collection, just like that. So it pulls all the images in there almost instantaneously. So these collection sets, when you create them, I'll just show you really quick and then we'll move on. Duplicating another one and then double clicking it, you can do anything you could think of on your thing. So if you needed to do particular sources or file types or cameras, everything I shot with a particular camera model or particular lens or focal speed. So if I wanted to do all my night images, I could really quickly do a high focal length, a high shutter speed ISO, high ISO, high shutter speed, low aperture filter, and it would automatically create those images. So you can do all kinds of things. You could go through there and do has not been adjusted or has not been edited. So there's just lots and lots of ways to kind of slice and dice this stuff as you go through it. So that is really crude on smart collections. You could teach entire classes on it. I just wanted to give you a preview of what that is if you're not aware of it. Okay, I want to turn myself in for running information off of two computers. And I think this goes back to the earlier thing I talked about with Ben, to start off between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. So I have a client works outside of her main area, wants to be able to edit her images on her laptop and also on her desktop, or also do the same thing when she travels. So this was a good challenge for us to look at. I'll send you the workflow on what we figured out for the two options for her. One was moving it to cloud, and the other was to store everything on the external drive, including her catalog. So now, regardless of where she is, whatever her external drive plugged in, she's going to be operating off of her images. And so that makes a really nice thing to do. So you'll get the workflow on how to do that and some information. And then the other part is I can't keep my catalog straight. So this can really impact people. And I'm just going to say my personal feeling on this. We had some questions come in about catalogs and catalog information. The truth of the whole thing is I have not experienced that. I don't have a 50,000 photo catalog. I only have 15,000 in my catalog. I've heard from multiple people, you don't start to experience the need to have separate catalogs until you get well over 50,000 images. And so if you're under 50,000, like most of us are, I would highly encourage you to only have one catalog. Becomes really confusing if you have multiple catalogs, and it's really easy to merge catalogs together. So if you do have multiples, there's YouTube tutorials, there's lots of things you can do to merge your catalogs together to only have one catalog. But the biggest thing is right here when it says, when starting up, use this catalog. And that is to load the most recent catalog. And I'll show you. Let's go into Lightroom really quick and show you. Come on. So Lightroom Classic, Preferences, and I pulled up General. And so I only have an old catalog, or actually I think this is my current catalog. I only have one catalog. And I've seen people tons and tons of catalogs down through here. So keeping those straight is very confusing. But having the box checked that says load most recent catalog is vitally important. So that would be the one you were editing in the last time. If you're using more than one catalog, the thing I would tell you is to change this to prompt me when starting Lightroom. And so what that's going to do is prompt you on which catalog you want to choose, and you're going to have to make that choice. If you don't have it doing that, you're going to be able to go through multiples. So this is a big thing that I would try to tell you is to do it. The other thing I would say under the catalog is to treat, if you're shooting both JPEG and RAW, next to RAW files as separate photos. That's a kind of a big deal as well. So otherwise they'll look exactly the same. They'll be stacked. And oftentimes you're may want to delete a JPEG or delete a RAW. And I always keep that one checked as well. Okay, so that is keeping some catalogs straight. And we got like 5 or so slides left. And so we'll have time at the end to try to figure out that's what I mentioned there. Okay, I recently moved from Lightroom to Photoshop and I lost. Yes, this becomes an issue. So if you're going back and forth between Lightroom and Photoshop, there's a couple things you're going to want to take a look at and to change. And so now we're going to go back up to Preferences. Let's give it a quick second. So Lightroom Classic, Preferences, and External Editing. And I gave you a copy. You'll get a copy of the slides to see what I have. And so what I do personally is I have the file format when I'm going to Photoshop as a TIFF for a wide variety of reasons, least of which is the TIFF files seem to work better for stacking and some other things than PSDs sometimes do. I have the color space I want, which is a whole nother thing. And I always have 16 bits per component. I shoot professional cameras, D810, D850, Nikons. If you can choose 16 bits component, you're going to see so much more data and you're going to see so much better image quality. And I've seen a lot of things where the bit depth is only 8 bits. My resolution's at 300 and I do zip compression. So what this is telling Lightroom is when I kick something over into Photoshop, it should be kicking it over in this format ready to go. So that's a big deal kind of right out of the gate. And this isn't about Photoshop tonight, but I'm going to show really quick what it does. So say we want to take this image into Photoshop. So we'd go edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So if you don't do it as a Lightroom adjustments, you're not going to get any of your adjustments you've made to the image. It's going to basically just pull over a raw file. And so I always do the edit in with Lightroom adjustments. And so now it's going to pull it into Photoshop and we have it in here. And maybe I make a couple minor tweaks and modifications. So I do a layer adjustment to kind of darken this thing down. Oh, doesn't that look nice on my slides? And then maybe I do something to take down my midtones on my slides. I never edited my slides before. So I've made a couple adjustments here. So now I have two options. Option one is I can just exit and hit the exit button, and it'll send it right back into Photoshop with those edits. Or option two, which if you're wanting to preserve this file and do something with, is to do file save as, and then you would save that into a new location. And so maybe I'd save that one on my desktop. And the reason is, so if it goes back into Lightroom the way it is, you can't get your layers to be able to open back up. So if I needed to make adjustments back to that image later, I won't be able to get those layers back. And so,
Hey Nick, can I correct that? That's actually not accurate.
is it changed finally?
No, it hasn't changed. It's always been an option. You would edit it as you would choose to like edit the original file, and it would reopen the PSD or the TIFF with the layers intact.
So what? So edit in Photoshop?
Yep.
Hmm.
I can show that a little bit later.
Yeah.
If that would be helpful.
No, I did I did it the other day, and it wasn't keeping, it was keeping everything there, but when I was opening it in Photoshop, it was taking my TIFFs and reopening them without all the layers.
Yeah, no, you can reopen it with layers intact.
Oh, good.
I can set up a quick thing on my end here and show it if that would be helpful.
Okay, that might be helpful. So that would be helpful. So that's one of the things that I always want to say is preserving our layers. And so whether you're saving it back into Lightroom, or in this case, when I save all my files, I don't want those, they're huge files. When I do a master print file, sometimes it'll be 3 or 4 gigabytes, and I don't want that big file in Lightroom with all my other raw files. And so I always save them separately. And the biggest reason is then when I open them as TIFFs, I can get all my layers back right then and there. So it's good to know. Okay. So we're at almost 10 after. There's looks like a bunch of questions to you. It looks like you've answered a bunch. Wow, we got a lot of questions tonight. And then we have some other ones that came in. So I'm going to say a couple quick things. We covered a lot tonight. I know there's going to be people, I'll get the emails inevitable. Wow, that was great. Thanks so much. I'll get the people that say you didn't cover this issue or that issue. Trying to do the best I can to bridge a wide variety of different skill levels and topics based on what I know. I know it's a lot of information. The other thing I'll offer real quick is I have a ton of great learning opportunities coming up. I teach much more in-depth, smaller classes, which I call my deeper dive classes. I teach also a lot of overview classes around some of the other elements, light and composition, some of the more in-depth classes related to, I'm doing one right now on night photography that wraps up this weekend. So I got a whole bunch of those. I'm also doing the first of the photo bites on composition and image design. These are $15 classes. They're about 45 minutes with 15 to 30 minutes of Q&A. So really in-depth, really cost-effective. You get a recording, you get a bunch of materials that go along with it. And then I have a whole bunch of free presentations coming up. So doing things on the psychology of photography, talking about the creative process, discovery of artistic vision, just one on fear in photography. So feel free to keep in touch on those. Also, if you have Lightroom problems, like we went through tonight, that you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I do offer one-on-one work with clients directly in Lightroom or Photoshop, technical details, processing, file organizations, etc. I also can do image reviews as well. And then I have a bunch of tutorials on my website, about $15. Most expensive 50, which is a very expensive one on printing, but it comes with a print credit. So most of them are $15 and they work through a wide variety of issues. Okay, well, I'm going to stop my share, Ben, and I'm going to let you show me and everybody else how to do that, and then we'll take more questions.
Hey, before you stop your share, Nick, let me ask a question that came in, and I apologize because you may have talked about this already. I was concentrating on questions that were coming in, so I wasn't always totally in tune with what you were saying. But someone's asking about kind of workflow around working with, well, actually, now that I'm saying that, I'm not totally sure what the question's about. Working with Lightroom Classic on a laptop while traveling and no access to internet. So you don't need access to the internet. So that shouldn't be an issue. But I was sort of interpreting the question as being, I have my main catalog on a computer at home, but I'm traveling with Lightroom Classic on a laptop, and then like, how do I
Yep.
do
No, and
that? Do you
that's
want to talk
actually,
about that a little bit?
yeah, that's a great question. So that's what I do when I travel. So I have this is my 27-inch iMac. And then when I'm working, when I'm out in the field, I have a small MacBook Pro. And the way I do that is I have my external drive there. So I'll download my images as I see fit, get them off my memory cards or whatever. And then I'll do my file organization on my laptop copy. And then when I get back home, I'll come in and I'll go into Lightroom and sorry, I was trying to show it real quick. And so then I go into file and I go into import from another catalog. And so then would find my catalog there. And then when you go through the dialog, then you can choose to merge that catalog into the main catalog. And so that's the way I do it when I'm out in the field working on a separate catalog. Then when I get back to my computer where I store everything, then I merge that catalog into here and have only one catalog.
Thank you, Nick. And as Reed points out in the chat, you do need the internet. You do need to make sure you're signed in to Creative Cloud, to Lightroom Classic before you depart the internet.
Yeah.
But you only, I think Creative Cloud checks once every 90 days or something like that. So you only need to be signed in or you only need to be on the internet once every 90 days. But as long as you've signed in right before you go off the internet, you should be fine.
Yep. Okay. Do you want to set up and show that real quick? And then
sure, I can show that real quick. Yep.
Hold on. Stop sharing. I got to set it up so you can share. All panelists. Okay, I'll look at some of the questions while you're setting that up. So,
okay, great. Yo, allow Zoom to share your screen, security system. Okay, hang on. It's never that easy, is it? Sorry, what did it need in security and preferences? It needed me to do open preferences, security and privacy to grant access. Stand by.
man, this is great, Ben. If I didn't have you tonight, I would have been up the creek.
I was typing as fast as I could.
Look at you go. Wow, look at all the questions he answered in the Q&A.
Okay, well, you know what? It's not gonna let me share my screen until I quit and relaunch Zoom because of security stuff on the Mac. So let me just verbally say, when you're in, and actually let me get the actual dialogue up in front of my face here so I can quote it exactly. Or you know what I could do? Like, you could share your screen and I could,
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, you share your screen and I can kind of talk through it. Do you have a PSD handy, a multi-layer PSD?
I do,
or if
yeah.
you don't, we can make one. Okay.
I think this is the one yeah, this is the TIFF right here.
Okay, and is that multi-layer?
Yeah.
Okay, so just go ahead and right click on there and choose edit in Photoshop. And then what you'd want to do here, instead of editing a copy, you'd want to edit the original. So what happens, so before you hit edit, what happens here is if you're editing a copy, then it's creating a new copy of the file, and that's just like a flattened file where it's like baked in Lightroom adjustments, which is the option you had. But if you choose edit original, it's going to open that existing multi-layered TIFF file, and all of the layers will be intact in Photoshop.
Yes, okay. Okay, so we want to edit the first time with Lightroom adjustments, but then we want to edit the original the second time.
Right. So if you had done edit in Photoshop already, you've made this multi-layered file, you came back into Lightroom,
Yeah.
and you did additional develop adjustments in Lightroom, then if you did edit in Photoshop again and you chose edit original, you wouldn't see those edits that you had done in Lightroom in Photoshop.
Yep.
But that might be okay, right? I mean, you haven't lost them. They still exist there in Lightroom. So you would do whatever tweak you needed to do in Photoshop and save it. And when you were back in Lightroom, those edits you've done in Lightroom would still be showing on the file.
Interesting. That's good to know. Okay. Well, should we, considering you answered 36 and had some others that weren't in there, do we have other questions that we should try to get through, you think, still? Or
so there's a question from Reed asking if I'm still doing the coffee break. That was for anybody who doesn't know what that is. I for about 3 years or so, I did a video series called Lightroom Classic Coffee Break, which was a series of video kind of tips and tricks on Lightroom Classic stuff. And really the distinguishing feature of the videos is that each video was 60 seconds or less. I am not doing those anymore, but the existing ones, there's about 70 of them or so you can find if you go to an internet search for Lightroom Classic Coffee Break. You can find the full playlist on YouTube and watch all 70 whatever of them of little 60 seconds or less tips and tricks for Lightroom Classic.
I didn't know I didn't know you were such a celebrity. Jeez.
I have I was in the what's it called, that place in San Francisco where the Palace of Fine Arts. I was walking by the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco once. I wasn't walking by, I had my tripod set up and I was taking pictures of it, and somebody walked by me and said, "Hey, Mr. Adobe." That's the closest I've come to being recognized in the wild.
There you go.
Anyway.
And then they ask you Lightroom questions, right?
Yeah, right. So there's a question from Philip saying that sounds like what he's saying is when he imports a catalog, like a catalog that he's been doing while traveling into his main catalog at home, that it duplicates keywords. I'll have to look into that. I don't think that's supposed to happen. I guess it's possible if there's any difference at all between them, like you used a lowercase in one and an uppercase in the other, then yeah, they would duplicate. If they're truly identical, they shouldn't duplicate, I don't think. But I would have to try that. I'd have to look into that.
Okay.
Let's see. Another question from Philip. What is this about slideshows? I don't actually know about that. I didn't really. I only have a Mac. So is the question that there's a shadow option for text and slideshows on the Mac, but that option doesn't exist on Windows? That surprises me. But I'll have to take your word for it.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
So I'm going back through some of the questions that you answered. One came from Anthony about any faster in importing images from a media card. I have one of the XQD cards, which is the new card for the Sony. Sony makes them, even though it's for a Nikon, and it's lightning fast to import. But then the other thing you need to look at is the transfer rate. Can be the transfer rate if you're using any type of a connector, special connector. He asked about that, but when I import off of that media card, it's probably like 10 to 15 times faster than a regular SD card. So, and then there's some of the other ones between the two Lightroom. Thanks for showing that.
So Lori asks, if it doesn't show Lightroom edits in Photoshop, how do you know that what you're doing in Photoshop is right? So, what I would do is, I would follow what Nick showed in his presentation here, where you do your initial edits in Lightroom, and then you open if there is something that you want to do in Photoshop, you do an edit in Photoshop and you choose that first option, which was edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So you'll see all those Lightroom adjustments, but they get, you know, baked into the file. And then if you go back to Lightroom, I mean, ideally, I guess the short answer to the question is ideally you wouldn't have to do a lot of back and forth, right? So, but yeah, it depends on what you're doing. If all you're doing is, maybe you need to go, like, what are you going to Photoshop for? If you're going to Photoshop because there's some tricky, you know, distracting element that you need to remove in Lightroom that you, or in Photoshop that you can't remove using Healing Brush and Lightroom Classic, then, you know, you probably don't need to see like your color grading that you did in Lightroom Classic in order to remove that.
And then the other thing I'd add to that is if you open it as a smart object, when you right click and open it as open it as a smart object, then you automatically get all of your Lightroom adjustments in Adobe Camera Raw. You just have to double click the image, which is good.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And when you're in, that also allows you within Photoshop to adjust the Lightroom edits non-destructively as well if you need to when you're in Photoshop.
No, I always try to. So a couple other questions that came through. Julia asked, when Lightroom won't stitch a panel, what do you suggest? And the thing I would also suggest, so Lightroom's panel stitching is amazing. I have Milky Way panels that are stitched together absolutely perfectly. You never think it would be the case, just of the sky. The other option you have is PT GUI is what it's called. And it's a third party. I can't remember if it's free, but at least you can get a demo. And that you can manually stitch together almost any image with that one, which is good. So accessing the recording, missing presets. Other questions, new ones in at all? Sounds like Bob's
so there's a
the
question
calendar.
about Lightroom on Apple Silicon. So Lightroom, as opposed to Lightroom Classic, is currently available as a native app on Apple Silicon. Lightroom Classic will be available as a native app on Lightroom Silicon sometime in the relatively near future. And in the meantime, no particular tips or tricks. It works in emulation mode like shockingly well, actually, way better than I would have thought.
Yeah. Okay. Ben, you just said your questions are answering is amazing. It's great. So I'll have to hire for my next one.
I'll be your assistant.
Yeah, exactly.
So Brian asks, is there a new Lightroom update that we're being required to use soon? I was asked to update to new Lightroom, but my images were not there. So you're never, no, I can't say never, but you're typically not required to do an update. In general, it's always best to be running the latest update if your computer will support it. If you installed a new update of Lightroom Classic and launched and your images weren't there, that suggests to me that somehow maybe the wrong catalog was opened. Seems like the most likely answer. Nick, do you have any ideas about that?
I don't. So sounds good to me.
And Steve is asking when we'll have support for the Nikon Z6 II. We generally, yeah, I don't know specifically. We generally release, we generally have updates. We generally release updates about every 2 or 3 months. Sometimes those updates are just camera support updates. And sometimes they also include new features. So I mean, I would, in general, we're pretty quick with new camera support. I wouldn't expect you to have to wait more than 2 or 3 months, but it's usually not that long because we're usually able to get cameras in advance of their release.
Interesting. So reading the notes too, that you know somebody has 20 million photos in their catalog. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was somebody who, I mean, I don't know the person, but someone on the team was talking with this person at one point. I don't know what the context was, but he did a huge number of time-lapse videos.
Yeah.
And so all of the images, all of the still images that he shot to use in time lapse, he imported into Lightroom Classic.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah, it's probably, it could have been, trying to think of the one guy that did moving art, Louis Schwartzman. He did this video called Moving Art, and it was like 6 years of time-lapse images that he put together into like a series, and it's on Netflix. It's great. So,
Brian asked, what's the latest version of Lightroom Classic? The latest version is version 10.1.1. And you can tell what version you're using in Lightroom Classic by going to the Help menu and going to System Info. And the first line in the System Info will be the version number. So 10.1.1 is the latest version. The application is installed and updated via the Creative Cloud desktop app, which can be set, I think actually is by default now set to install new updates automatically, although yours may not be necessarily. But you can always go into the Creative Cloud desktop app in order to install the latest updates. And if you like, you can set it to automatically install the latest updates, so you don't have to worry about it. Dana asked, it would be nice if text could be added to an image right in Lightroom, any chance? In terms of like a genuinely sort of flexible like text tool that lets you do like kind of whatever you want, that's Photoshop, and you'll need to use the edit in Photoshop for that. Lightroom Classic can put text over images in certain limited ways. Nick, I don't know if you want to show any of that. Nick did talk about, if you remember from earlier in his presentation, he talked about the identity plate. So you can, for example, use the identity plate as a text element on top of photos in a web gallery or in a slideshow or something like that. But yeah, the text capabilities of Lightroom are relatively minimal.
Yep. Yeah. So the last questions coming in now kind of start going. Oh, I know we had a couple other ones that had come in that I didn't get into came in at the tail end.
While you're looking, I'll try to answer a couple of these. So James is asking about, can you please push to get collaborative proofing into production versus a tech preview? When it breaks, support looks at me all stupid like. I think what James is talking about is, yeah, we have like, I guess, a tech preview of a feature that allows you to share a gallery of images with a client over the web, and they do kind of approval and so on those images. I think that's what you're talking about, James. James, maybe you want to contact me. You can email me via the Meetup page. I'd like to know how or when it's breaking. And then yes, collaboration is a focus for us. So we'll see where that goes. Andrew was asking about lens profiles for older lenses. We actually have freely available and downloadable from Adobe's website a tool that allows you to build your own lens profiles if you want to get crazy. And actually, I recorded once a session on how to do that. I'll see if I can find a link and post it on the Meetup site. And then, sorry, I'm getting off into the weeds here now. We used to have a lens profile downloader that lets you download profiles that had been built by other customers, and you could often find profiles for older lenses in there, but I'm actually not sure we support that anymore. Sorry, I'd have to go double check on that. That was a really vague answer.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know you could build your own lens profiles. That's good.
You can build your own lens profiles if you're a masochist.
Yeah. But that's interesting. Yeah, the other questions that came in that I didn't have time, they came in like right at the tail end. One of them was related to halos and subjects when there's high contrast. And that's less about but it's the dynamic range functionality comes into play, and it has less to do with Lightroom than it does to do with the camera sensor in most of my experience. But it's kind of goes on a case by case basis. And then I will also send out when I send out the follow-up, the information on how to upgrade your RAM for a Mac. And I probably should look on the PC and how to do it too, even though there's so many thousands of different models, but because I was like shocked it was that cheap, and it's made a big difference. So
Jim asked if there's a question about turning off notifications for updates that are available for apps in Creative Cloud. I don't know if you can leave on notifications and updates for particular applications and off for others, but you can. You mentioned, Jim mentioned that he got a new version of Acrobat installed and he wants the old version. You can install old versions. You can uninstall the new version and you can install old versions via the Creative Cloud desktop app. So poke around in there, you'll find it, or Google it, or email me.
Good deal.
If you can't find it.
All right, final questions. We're at our time.
We're at 8:30. So do you want to take one more, Nick, and then we'll say goodnight?
Sure. Although you know, they came to see my face and then they asked me to turn it off, but they were wanting more of you to answer the questions than me. Because
no, I don't think they want me. I was just available, so I was.
You just have the
chiming in.
No, your answers are absolutely. I mean, it's like you do this for a living or something, Ben.
Oh, and Andrew actually answered for me so the downloader is no longer available. That's right. Okay. Yeah. That is kind of sad. But the tools for making your own profiles are still available. Your own lens profile.
Yeah.
And the battery in one of my AirPods just died. I think that means it's time to say goodnight.
There you go. Exactly. So the final question is: I have an older MacBook Pro that I want to upgrade to the solid state from 256 to 2 terabyte. Is there service company that could do this and clone the drive? I'll have to get back to you, David, on that. So I know I have his direct contact. So, but yeah, I think Geek Squad probably is part of the answer, or your local IT guy to do that upgrade. If you're going to do the upgrade, but if you're going to do a whole new computer, I can send you some information on that. So.
Well, this was really fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you everybody for attending. And Nick, you can send me a link to the recording and I'll post that on the Meetup page and people can access that later.
Sounds great. I'll get it out.
And then for anybody, I know, and Nick, I know you sent this out to a lot of folks who follow you. For anybody who's interested in this, I do host a sort of monthly Lightroom user group meeting like this with different photographers presenting. So yeah, you can go to meetup.com and look for San Francisco, or what is it called? San Francisco Bay Area Lightroom User Group.
Yep. I'll put a link in that to my people. So.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you, Nick. And then you'll get invitations for future meetups like this. So.
Yep. Get some great speakers in for sure. So.
All right. Well, thanks again, Nick. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you, Ben. Nice to see everybody else online. Thanks for all the questions and interactions.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.